From the military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's 1 p.m. on the East Coast for those of you who are not here in California with me. So we get together each Tuesday to talk about military history, military doctrine, the practices of great military leaders, and translate those into things we can do in our businesses in order to make them run better and have better relations with our team members and those kind of things. So today, my topic is using training to kind of unite your team and build esprit de corps. So for people who have been in the military, training is how shall I put this? Some of it is fantastic, and other parts of it, we could do without. So I'm going to start with the stuff we could do without. So every year there are mandatory what are called CBT, computer-based trainings, that every service member has to take, and they're things like cybersecurity, human trafficking avoidance, sexual assault training, and often every year it's the same training. And frankly, the quality of the training was never good. It was mediocre at best. And so while these trainings were supposed to help service members deal with problems and issues within the military, and the problems were real. I'm not saying that the military is free of all problems, but using this computer-based training to deal with them was really, I think, a way for the military to be able to say to Congress, oh no, see, we're doing something about it, when in fact they weren't really doing anything about it. So most of us would just click through the training as quickly as we could. In some cases, there wasn't any kind of quiz or anything. So if you could just click through the training and get the certificate, bang, you were done. And that was really the goal. There was no learning going on. There was no understanding of a problem. And this is an example of the kind of training that hopefully people in the civilian sector avoid like the plague, because it's not only is it completely useless, but it actually degraded morale and unit cohesion, because it was so bad, frankly. And once in a while they would come up with a new training that was good, but that was a rare occurrence. The flip side is, and the area where the military does a good job in training, is in what's called physical readiness. So in the Navy and the Marine Corps, we have something called the PRT, the physical readiness test. And it changes from time to time. But when I was in the Navy, so the physical readiness test consisted of 4 things, okay? First was you had to be able to touch your toes, which may sound silly, but it was a test of sort of flexibility, if you will. And actually, I think by the time I got out of the Navy, they weren't having you do that anymore, because people were hurting their backs by, touching their toes, which is, I think, silly, but whatever. Another part of the physical readiness test was doing push-ups, okay? And that's just, the same kind of push-ups that you typically saw. Now, what was interesting was you had to have your hands pretty much directly below your shoulders, okay? You couldn't widen your hands, which seems strange because it's harder to do push-ups with your hands farther apart. So if for a service member who was putting his hands out farther, he was actually making it more difficult on himself. But whatever, that was, that was the rules of the game, and that's how you did it. The next thing was sit-ups, or I mean, they were really more like crunches. So the rules of the sit-ups were that you put your hands over your chest like this. So your arm had to touch your legs, which were bent, and your shoulder blades had to touch the ground. Okay, so that's why they called them sit-ups. Although, like I said, I think they were really more like crunches. And then depending on your age, your sex, there was a minimum score and a maximum score that you could get, and based on the number of push-ups and sit-ups that you did. And then the fourth part was a 1.5 mile run. Okay, now the interesting thing about the run was you had certain conditions for what the layout of the run was. So one of them was that you weren't supposed to have to make any U-turns. Now, by the way, this was widely ignored, at least when I was in the Navy. I would say in at least half the PRTs I did, there was a U-turn. Now, of course, the problem with a U-turn is to make that U-turn, you have to slow down. So it caused people's scores to be a little bit lower than what they otherwise might be. But anyway, so the toe touching was kind of like a pass-fail thing. The other three, you got a score based on your performance within your age and sex category, and that gave you your PRT score. Now, well, I won't say that all people, enthusiastically participated in the PRT. A lot of people didn't like it. And in fact, there were people who would get them do whatever they could to get a doctor's note saying they were excused from it. I mean, there's always going to be people like that. But for most people in the military, we took it pretty seriously. And some people even, trained for it. Now, you took the PRT basically every 6 months. So my attitude toward it was, I'm going to always stay in training because it didn't make sense to sort of, slough off for 3 months and then try to get back in shape for 3 months or 2 months or whatever it was. And that was really the idea. Was it was an incentive to keep in shape all the time, right? So on the day of the PRT, everybody would be out. It was done on a unit by unit basis, and everybody would be out there in their PT gear. You had to wear the official PT gear for the Navy. It was these sort of blue blue nylon shorts with the word Navy on them, and this sort of gold, wicking shirt. I think it also said Navy on it, if I recall. And then you paired off to do the push-ups and the sit-ups, and then you ran the running part of it on your own. So I won't say it was exactly fun, but it was a challenge, and you would, like, with whoever you were paired up with, you would try and do better than the other guy. A little sort of friendly competition there, and there would, one of the things, like, if you whoever you were partnered with, so the person who was doing the exercise, the other person would count, right? So, but you had to be careful that they were counting correctly, right? So again, a little kind of friendly competition, but also that the person who was counting would kind of look around and see, like with the push-ups especially, people would get to the point where even though you did as many as you could in 2 minutes, and same with the sit-ups. So there are people who after 1.5 minutes, they just couldn't do anymore, right? And so you keep your, if you were kind of like helping your partner out, you'd like keep keep going. You're like last man standing kind of thing, that kind of stuff, right? And like some of these young guys were pretty impressive. They'd be like really cranking out the push-ups, right? and, and after a minute and a half, most people were done. I mean, my philosophy was I would know what the maximum number I had to do was to get the top score. And I would bang that out as quickly as I possibly could, and that was it. And normally I could do it in less than 2 minutes, and I wasn't going to do more than that because I didn't need to. It wouldn't increase my score, and there was no sense tiring myself out doing more push-ups than I needed to, and then not doing as well, for example, on the sit-ups or something like that. But some of these young guys, where the maximum number was very high, they'd like be cranking out as fast as they could in 2 minutes, and it was really pretty cool to watch them do it, right? And so you got camaraderie there because everybody is sort of going through the somewhat painful, not like painful, like, oh, I'm hurting, but just, difficult testing evolution. And so it was fun in that respect. Typically the most fun was the run, at least for the people who are into running, which I've been a runner for many, many years. And, it was a race for sure. I mean, it was 1.5 miles, which you say, wow, that's a long way. But for runners, a 1.5 miles really isn't that long. And for those of us who really were runners and competitive, so we would, I don't want to say we would literally sprint the whole 1.5 miles, but we would run pretty fast for the whole 1.5 miles. And for the last 1/4 mile or so, it was probably an all-out sprint, right? And again, you wanted to get, of course, the best score you could, but you also wanted the bragging rights of having beaten, somebody, like a buddy or whatever. And one of my probably my best PRT was when I was with the SEAL team, and here I am. At the time, I was in my 50s. Let's see, I was in my late 50s at that point, or mid 50s, I guess mid 50s, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get clobbered by all these operators. I mean, these are SEALs, right? They're like the most fit people in the world. And when it came to the push-ups and the sit-ups, they pretty much cleaned my clock. But then we got ready to do the run. Knowing I was a pretty good runner, so the idea was the best runners would be in the front, and the slowest would be in the back when you started, because the timer didn't actually start until the last runner crossed the starting line. It was, so you could game the system by a few seconds, right? So the fast runners, we take off, and it was pretty clear there were about, I don't know, 8 or 10 of us that were, in the front group, and we're running, and the pace going out was pretty fast, and we were on this sort of L-shaped track, if you will, not literally a track, but course is the word I'm looking for. We had to go out, turn to our right, go down, make a U-turn, come back, and turn to our left, and across the starting line, which became the finish line, right? And so I'm doing my best, keeping up. And as we come around that turn at the 3/4 mile mark, I'm still pretty much in this group. And I'm thinking, okay, well, now here it comes. They're going to take off and leave me in the dust. And an interesting thing happened. The front people in the group really started going faster. And so I did my best to keep pace with them. And 2 or 3, 4 of the people sort of started dropping back. And I'm like, how could this possibly be, right? And so there's 4 of us left in the front group, right? And I'm like, this is crazy, right? And I'm dogging this one guy, and he's probably half my age at best, right? And he's like, I can't let this old man beat me. I can't. He's like pounding. And we get down all the way to the thing where we're going to turn left. And as we're turning left, I got inside of him. I got in front of him. And as we crossed the finish line, I was third out of our SEAL team, right? And the guy I edged out, he was so ticked off he wouldn't even speak to me. And I'm thinking to myself, how could this possibly be, right? And so I went up to the guy who came in first, and I'm like, I'm like, hey man, that was a great run. With you setting the pace, I ran faster than I think I've run in years. And he's like, hey man, I'm, good job kind of thing. And we're just sort of chatting. I'm like, to be honest with you, I don't understand how someone my age could be competitive with, you guys. You're all operators, you're all in the field, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. And he said, well, just keep in mind that we don't train for speed. We train for endurance for the most part. And he said, so, doing a 1.5 mile run is essentially a speed run for us. And that's not what we do. He said, if we were doing a 10-mile run, we would probably, frankly, clobber you. And I'm like, yeah, for sure you would. Right. So, but it just goes to show you that, it really was a bonding experience. It was a morale building experience for us. And for me, I kind of have bragging rights for a day or two that, I came in third, in the PRT for a SEAL team. Right. So my point in telling you about this is this was an experience that everybody in our unit had. It didn't matter from the most junior to the most senior. The commanding officer of a SEAL team is a Navy commander. And we actually had some Navy captains who were part of the SEAL team. They were part of sort of little branches of the team, if you will. Everybody had to take the PRT. It didn't matter what your rate or rank was. Didn't matter what your rate was, as an enlisted guy. Didn't matter whether you were an operator, you were an enabler like I was. Didn't matter. Everybody took the PRT twice a year. Now, by the way, there are exceptions when a unit was deployed on a ship. So then the PRT would be canceled because it's too difficult to do, among other things, a 1.5 mile run on a ship. It's like for a ship that's, whatever, carrier is about 1,000 yards long at the deck. It's like you're going to, run back and forth, whatever, however many times, 5 times or something. It doesn't make any sense. It's too dangerous. Can't interrupt flight operations, all that kind of stuff. But aside from an exception like that, everybody does the PRT twice a year. And everybody, like I said, goes through this kind of somewhat annoying, somewhat painful, challenging training evolution once a year. So I think that while if people had their choice, they probably wouldn't have done it. The flip side is that because it was a requirement, people sort of made of it what it could be. And so I think we could take this idea and translate it into our businesses. So I was thinking about an example. So, I mean, you could do, by the way, a physical fitness example. Obviously, you don't want to break your people, but no matter what business you're in, keeping your people physically fit is important, right? And so it could be, a fun thing to do. Now, can you make it mandatory? Maybe you can't literally make it mandatory, in a civilian business, but you could incentivize your employees to take part in it, and in so doing, make it attractive for them to be a part of this. And if you make it a great experience, even if when you start it, a lot of people don't participate. If the ones who do participate really enjoy it, they enjoy the camaraderie, they enjoy a little bit of competition. So then, other people may join in, and so in that way, you can, build on your success and kind of, make it a thing. But, maybe physical fitness is just, not the way to go with your organization. That doesn't mean that you can't build some kind of training evolution that will benefit your company. So I have a friend who's a data scientist, and he does these things called Kaggle competitions. And I think they're basically like a programming challenge that you do among people like him who do coding and data science and that sort of thing. Now, the Kaggle competitions, from what I understand, are very competitive. They're very challenging. But I think that we could all take some aspect of our business and turn it into something of a game, something of a competition. So, if you're lawyers, you could do maybe a research contest game, or a document writing game, or even do like what do they call it, moot court, I think it's called, where you have a moot court competition within your firm. Same with accountants. You could do the best tax return. Give them a set of information about like a made up taxpayer, right? And have a competition to see who could come up with the best tax return, right? And you could have a panel of judges, and people maybe are they may want to use things that are more likely to get audited, that kind of thing. You could build all that stuff into it, and it could be a lot of fun. For people in financial services, same kind of thing. Give everybody $100,000 to do a sample portfolio, and over a month period, whoever has the most valuable portfolio wins, or something like that. And you could have different things. You could have a portfolio, which one generates the most income, which one has the greatest capital appreciation. You can set up other metrics for these kind of portfolios, right? So no matter what your business is, you can set up these kind of trainings. Now, these are different than contests, right? So like in fast food restaurants, I think sometimes they'll have, who can upsell the most French fries or something like that. So that's different. That's a contest. And those can be fine. But that's not the same thing. A training is an opportunity for your people to learn how to do something better, really working as kind of a team, right? So like with the PRT, although our individual performance is what counted, that we all did it together gave us a chance to encourage each other, to sort of compete against each other in order to get the best performance out of each other, to train for it together in advance of the contest, those kind of things, right? And so all of those are Esprit building functions, okay, that are built into the nature of it. So I think the key to doing this in the civilian world would be to build in some of those same things. So maybe if you're lawyers and you do a moot court, so then you give your various teams the opportunity to do research over a certain period of time, and you could even have like two people or whatever, or three people or one person in the firm. They can be the client, right? And they know what they're being advised about. But then each team, gets to meet with them as the client, and depending on how good the team is at asking questions and relating to the client, that may determine, how well they perform, down the road or something like that. So all of these can be built in to the training that you do. And the training will be much more powerful than computer-based training. So what I can tell you from my experience in the military is, like, anytime we had to do CBT, it was like, nobody wanted to do it. And it was just a complete drag on everybody. But for being outside, that kind of stuff. So I mentioned that I was with a SEAL team. So when I would be down on duty, sometimes I would see what's called the BUDS training going on. BUDS is basic underwater something or other. It was the basic training that new recruits went through in order to determine whether they were actually going to become a SEAL. So one of the things they would do is they would run with this, it looked like a telephone pole on their shoulders, right? A whole group of them, or a whole Buds unit would be doing that. Another, this is one of the weirdest things I ever saw. Another group of SEAL recruits was pushing, I think it was a truck down the road. You say, well, okay, that's fine. Yeah, the wheels weren't turning. Right? I mean, it was the funniest thing. One of the funniest things I ever saw, because they're like this group of guys and they're pushing this truck, and I'm thinking to myself, this shouldn't be that hard with that many guys, right? And then I noticed the wheels weren't turning. They were pushing the truck, even though the wheels were stationary, and they're like, you can see the skid that it was causing in the road, right? Another training evolution they had was they took I think it was a 50-pound barbell, one of those round plates that you put on the bar to lift weights. And there was a chain strung through it. And then on the other end of the chain, it was looped with this leather pad on it. And they would sling the pad over their shoulder, and they would run, dragging this 50-pound barbell behind them from one end of the course to the other. They'd pull the thing off, hand it to the next guy, he'd put it on, and he'd pull it the other way. And they had 2 or 3 teams dragging this thing, back and forth. I mean, right? And they're yelling, come on, move, that kind of stuff, right? And I remember, by the way, the time I happened to see this, I was actually taking a class on special operations, and most of the members of the class were a Green Beret. I forget what it's called. It's like a Green Beret team. And I'm standing on this access balcony outside the classroom, and we're watching this. And one of the Green Berets turns to me at one point. He looks at me. He goes, "Wow, sir, they're just animals," because that's kind of the attitude that the Green Berets have, like these SEALs that are just all, brawn. And the Green Berets really sort of pride themselves on being kind of the brainy, special operators, that kind of thing. But it was funny because you're just dragging this 50-pound weight across, a concrete, patio, basically, is what it was. So all of these things were obviously the goal of the physical training is to build up muscles and endurance and all that kind of stuff. That's all good. But it was also to build esprit de corps. And we can do the same thing with our training in the business world, in the civilian world, if we give it some thought, right? Beyond just like being in the classroom and having someone lecture us, or going on a computer and doing some kind of computer-based training, getting out and doing things together, as a group, with some competition in it, really builds esprit de corps. Okay. And as long as the training is really relevant to what we do in our business, so then I think people will engage in it willingly, right? And they'll enjoy it, and it'll become kind of a thing in your company, right? So that's why I encourage you to think about this. How can you really make training vivid, make it active? Okay. And again, people may not want to do it in the beginning. You'll get some people who will do it, of course. But then, build on that. And once people see that it's fun and it's to a good purpose, I think you'll see, a lot more acceptance of it. So that's our show for today. Gave me the opportunity to tell a couple little sea stories, which are always fun. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Wednesday is my show, People Making Money. We're going to be talking about various types of leases. So I've done a couple of shows over the last few weeks on real estate investing. We're going to get into one of the more complex topics, okay, so that you can really understand how does a property generate income. And that's different depending on the type of property, the type of leases. And so it's important to understand these so that you are able to manage a property as efficiently as possible, make it as profitable as possible. So please do join me tomorrow, again at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Then next Monday at 10 a.m. is my show, Trusts and Estates Weekly. And then a week from today will be the next edition of Business Lessons from the Military. So I thank you very much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the topic today, and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. And signing off as I always do, Marie, darling, you are my belle. All the best.